Same-sex marriage and anonymous sperm or egg donation. What's the connection and why does it matter? Here's what lies ahead. 1. Voting yes or no on same-sex marriage is a choose your poison choice. 2. We'll be discussing the problem with anonymous gamete donation. Gametes are sperms or eggs. 3. What's wrong with voting no to make same-sex marriage illegal? 4. What's wrong with voting yes to make same-sex marriage legal? 5. If yes and no are both wrong, then what's right? 6. How come what's right is never discussed? 7. We provide links to sources that we cite and a lot of other related material. Part 1. Voting yes or no on same-sex marriage is a choose your poison choice. This video discussion presents a view about same-sex marriage that is not what you can vote for whether you vote yes or no to make same-sex marriage legal in our present society. Wait, did you hear that last sentence carefully? The view being presented here is neither the yes make same-sex marriage legal nor the no make it illegal position. How can that be, you ask? Well, that's why you need to watch this entire video. Otherwise, you'll never know. And by the way, big money doesn't want you to know either. If and only if you watch this entire video, you will come to think about the same-sex marriage debate very differently. Part 2. The problem with anonymous gamete, sperm or egg donation. Okay, we're ready to begin. As the title of this video suggests, it's important to understand the connection between anonymous sperm or egg donation and same-sex marriage, and to see why it matters. To do this, let's put the question of same-sex marriage aside for the moment and think just about anonymous gamete, i.e. sperm or egg, donation. By anonymous, we mean that the gamete donor remains completely unknown to the child. Many people see no problem with anonymous gamete donation. As long as loving parents raise the child, what difference does it make if none, one, or both of them provided the gamete that fertilized the egg that became the child? What's the big deal about the biological connection? It's only the emotional connection that matters, right? Wrong. As much as some may wish the biological connection didn't matter, the fact is that it does. Let's see how it matters. Slate.com, which is by no means a conservative site, posted an article titled, "The Sperm Donor Kids Are Not Really All Right. A New Study Shows They Suffer." It reports, regardless of socioeconomic status, donor offspring are twice as likely as those raised by biological parents to report problems with the law before age 25. They are more than twice as likely to report having struggled with substance abuse, and they are about 1.5 times as likely to report depression or other mental health problems. As a group, the donor offspring in our study are suffering more than those who are adopted, hurting more, feeling more confused, and feeling more isolated from their families. And our study found that the adoptees, on average, are struggling more than those raised by their biological parents. The donor offspring are more likely than the adopted to have struggled with addiction and delinquency, and, similar to the adopted, a significant number have confronted depression or other mental illness. Nearly half of donor offspring and more than half of adoptees agree, quote, "It is better to adopt than to use donated sperm or eggs to have a child," unquote. This study of 18 to 45-year-olds includes 485 who were conceived via sperm donation, 562 adopted as infants, and 563 raised by their biological parents. A word about adoption. Adoption is a morally praiseworthy act by adults trying to make life better for a child who, for reasons having nothing to do with the adopting parents, is separated from its biological parents. In contrast, adults who use an anonymous gamete donor are indeed the cause of the child being separated from a biological parent. This is a big difference. Katrina Clark, in her Washington Post article titled, quote, "My father was an anonymous sperm donor," unquote, in 12/17/06, writes, quote, "I'm here to tell you that emotionally, many of us are not keeping up. We didn't ask to be born into the situation with its limitations and confusion. It's hypocritical of parents and medical professionals to assume that biological roots won't matter to the, quote, products, unquote, of the cryobank service, when the longing for a biological relationship is what brings customers to the banks in the first place," unquote. Kathleen LaBounty used DNA tests to try to find her sperm donor father. Her story was reported by NPR, which said, "As test after test failed," LaBounty says, "she felt a mounting sense of loss, as if the pain of her infertile parents had been transferred to her." She also sees hypocrisy. Couples use donor sperm or egg because they very much want at least some biological connection to their child, and yet, she says, by using anonymous donors, they cut off that child's other links. Quote, "And not just with the biological father, but aunts, uncles, grandparents. It's half of the family," unquote, she says. Ellen Singer, licensed social worker at the Center for Adoption Support and Education, Inc., in her article, quote, "Talking with Children Conceived Through Donor Insemination, IVF with Egg Donor, or Surrogacy," unquote, writes about the, quote, "painful feelings," unquote, that a test tube child will naturally have. Just as an adopted child may wish he had been born to his adoptive parents, a child conceived with donor assistance may experience a sense of loss that he is not biologically, genetically related to both parents. Rather than protecting children from painful feelings through secrecy, parents who disclose information need to believe that children can be helped to cope with painful feelings," unquote. Okay, anonymous gamete donation. Most of the time it is in fact anonymous. Might be bad for the child, but how does this relate to whether or not gays should be allowed to marry? Sure, same-sex couples use anonymous gamete donation, but so do infertile straight couples and even single individuals. They all, gay or straight, do it for the same reason, to have a biological connection to their child. Is there anything wrong with that? No. There is nothing wrong with an infertile couple or an individual wanting to have a child they, at least one of the two people in the couple, are biologically related to. And it makes no difference if the infertility is caused by the couple's homosexuality or a medical condition affecting a heterosexual couple, or the fact that a single person cannot make a baby. At the same time, society cannot morally just ignore the risk of harm to a child due to having an anonymous biological parent. This brings us one step closer to seeing why the choices we are offered, vote yes or no to make same-sex marriage legal, are both bad. For the reasons we will look at next, to vote no on making same-sex marriage legal amounts to telling same-sex couples that they cannot have formal social approval to have a child of their own, i.e., one to which at least one member of the couple is biologically related, under any circumstances whatsoever. But to vote yes means, again, for reasons we will discuss next, ignoring the very real problem that children produced by anonymous gamete donation are at risk of serious harm. This is why the choice of voting yes or no is a choose your poison choice. Part 3. What's wrong with voting no? Let's start with what's wrong with the no vote choice to ban same-sex marriage. Making it illegal for a gay couple to marry means denying them what a marriage certificate confers to a couple in our society: formal social approval to have a child of their own. To see that this is what a marriage certificate means, ask yourself this question: how come we don't let siblings marry, but we let them be business partners or roommates or friends or be in any other kind of relationship? Is it because we hate siblings? Of course not. There is only one reason. We don't want to give them formal social approval to make a baby because of genetic harm. Whether the siblings intend to make a baby is irrelevant. We deny them a marriage certificate because we don't want to give them permission to make a baby. We likewise deny a driver's license to a blind person, even if he or she declares no intention to drive. Why? Because we don't give people permission to do what we don't want them to do. To see that one reason the U.S. Supreme Court approves of state laws banning sibling marriage is to prevent genetic harm to children, please read the University of Kentucky Law Journal article about this by going to the URLs on your screen, newdemocracyworld.org/laws.pdf, where it is linked and the relevant excerpts provided. And also this information is at the place online at the end of this video that you can see everything mentioned by this video, as well as other things, all in one place. So, voting no to making same-sex marriage legal means saying you don't want gay couples to have formal social approval to make a child of their own ever, no matter how they might go about it. That's wrong. But what does it mean to vote yes? Part 4. What's wrong with voting yes? Voting yes to make same-sex marriage legal means giving formal social approval to a same-sex couple to produce a child of their own. But the only way they can do that is with a third-party gamete donor. And present-day laws allow a person to donate a gamete with no intention to know and be known by the child as one of its two primary parents. This can harm the child. Voting yes, given our society's current laws about gamete donation, thus amounts to giving formal social approval to a gay couple to conceive a child in a manner that causes one of its biological parents to be anonymous, or merely somebody whose name is known but may live across town or in another state and be completely absent from the child's life. A yes vote to legalize gay marriage thus gives formal social approval of a practice that can harm children. It violates the principle that the needs of children trump the desires of adults. This choice is also wrong. Arguing that not all children suffer from not knowing a biological parent is like arguing that not all children conceived by siblings are genetically harmed. So what? Is it any wonder that the same-sex marriage debate is so divisive? Each side is defending the right of somebody to have what they ought to have. In one case, the right of adults to have a child of their own. In the other case, the right of a child to know and be known by both its biological parents. And each side is aghast at the other for not caring about the right of somebody. But wait, you ask, who says that no voters, the ones who vote no, care at all about children and gamete donors? Don't they just hate gays? No. If hatred of gays were what motivated most no votes, then the organizations leading the Vote No effort would mainly be saying bad things about gays. But it's children needing to know their biological parents that they always talk about. One leader of the movement against same-sex marriage, Maggie Gallagher, president of the Institute for Marriage and Public Policy, thus writes, quote, "Marriage has its own dignity and purpose and its own mission, bringing together male and female so that children can know and be known by, love and be loved by, their own mother and father." Brian Brown, president of the National Organization for Marriage, makes the same point in his debate with an advocate of same-sex marriage. He says, quote, "Two men and two women cannot naturally have their own children. There is a mother and a father somewhere. Marriage is the institution that connects that child to both its mother and father," unquote. Opposition to same-sex marriage for this reason is by no means limited to straight people. Some gay men have made a video expressing the very same point of view, and it's at the URL that you can see on your screen now. The Catholic Church's reason for opposing same-sex marriage is stated at marriageuniqueforareason.org/children-video, and they say, quote, "Any honest consideration of marriage must think about children. The marriage of a man and a woman is the central pro-child social institution and the rock of the natural family. Marriage has never been about the relationship of just any two adults," unquote. The Church speaks of, quote, "God's design. Every child has a father and a mother. so a child needs a father and a mother for the optimal environment for healthy growth in every other way, emotionally, psychologically, intellectually, morally, spiritually. Mothers and fathers are not interchangeable. They each bring unique gifts to the common mission of parenting." Unquote. While the Catholic Church may never perform a religious marriage ceremony for a same-sex couple, because its dogma is that God defines marriages between a man and a woman, its objection to civil same-sex marriage is the same concern for children reason as that of the other leading organizations opposed to same-sex marriage. Are some opponents of same-sex marriage bigots? Sure. By the same token, do some advocates of same-sex marriage have some outrageously terrible ideas? Sure. How could it be otherwise, since there are millions of people in each camp? But do most people in either camp have profoundly wrong and immoral views? No. There is no evidence that most people who oppose same-sex marriage are bigots against gays. Some point to their citing of the Bible against same-sex marriage as proof they are homophobic or incapable of thinking rationally on their own. But Martin Luther King Jr. cited the Bible against Jim Crow, and nobody says that shows he was unwise. It is common, no matter what the issue, for people who, independently of the Bible, have an opinion, to cite the Bible in defense of that view. That doesn't mean their opinion would change if somebody cited a contrary view in the Bible, as is often possible. Furthermore, most people have a hard time expressing explicitly the implicit reasons they think long-standing cultural practices, like the traditional idea of marriage, are good, even though they have very good reasons for liking them, which they would agree with if somebody else expressed these reasons explicitly. For example, how many people can explicitly give all their reasons why it's important to be polite? Big money doesn't open the mass media to ordinary people on either side of the same-sex marriage debate to express their actual, nuanced feelings. Most people want to remove the rich from power and have no rich and no poor, but when was the last time you heard a regular person say that on TV or radio or in a magazine? Part 5. If yes and no are both wrong, then what's right? If both a yes and a no vote on gay marriage are wrong, given our current laws about gamete donation, then what is right? Here is the answer that some of us in PDR Boston propose. We say that it should be legal for same-sex couples to marry, but only when the law makes it illegal to deliberately conceive a child with a gamete from a person who, at the time of conception, does not fully intend to raise the child and know and be known by the child as its co-primary parent. If two women, say, are married and they want a child of their own, they could use the sperm of a man to get pregnant. But they, or at least the biological mother, and the sperm donor father would have to intend to live together as a family and raise the child so it would have both its biological mother and biological father in its life. Does this live together with the gamete donor requirement discriminate against gay people? No. Here is why. The extra inconvenience or burden a gay couple has in this proposal is exactly the same as what an infertile opposite-sex couple has if it wants a child of its own. We see now that the real issue raised by the question of same-sex marriage is this: what protections are needed for the children that may be produced by infertile couples? It matters not a bit whether the infertility is due to sexual orientation or a medical condition. We also see that our proposal is a reasonable way to enable adults who are infertile to have a child of their own, while at the same time ensuring that children will not be put at undue risk of harm from not knowing and being known by both of their biological parents. Yes, our proposal puts some extra burden on gay couples, but no more than on infertile opposite-sex couples or single individuals. Infertility, for whatever reason, is an obstacle to having a child of one's own. The obstacle can be overcome, but it is immoral to do so at the expense of the child. Because our proposal addresses the chief concern of most people voting no on gay marriage, the welfare of children, most no voters would support it. And because it also addresses the concern of gays, letting them marry and have a child of their own, most yes voters would also support it. It's the basis of a compromise both sides could live with. Part 6. How come what's right is never discussed? The question is, how come something like our proposal has been completely censored from the mass and, quote, alternative media? These media never even mention the issue of gamete donation in connection with the gay marriage question. The media tell us there are only two sides: bigotry versus equality. Why is this happening? The answer starts with this basic fact. Big money controls the mass and, quote, alternative media, and big money uses it to divide and rule the American public so that we will be unable to do what most want to do: remove the rich from power to have real, not fake democracy with no rich and no poor. By limiting our choices to a yes or a no vote on legalizing gay marriage, and by censoring at the same time any discussion about how gamete donation relates to this question, big money pits those most concerned with the rights of gay adults against those most concerned with the rights of children. By orchestrating this phony debate on same-sex marriage, big money has induced lots of Americans to view lots of other Americans with contempt bordering on fear. Many liberals have been tricked by this phony debate into believing that people in the other camp are so profoundly bigoted that they should not even be allowed to vote on the issue. For example, the main organization for same-sex marriage in Massachusetts, called Mass Equality, actually opposed letting people vote on the issue, arguing, quote, "It's wrong to vote on rights," unquote. This is how big money is luring liberals to oppose the very idea of democracy, that ordinary people are the ones who should make the important social decisions, like what is and isn't a right. Good and decent people can, of course, disagree about how much protection children of infertile couples using egg or sperm donors need. If the ruling class hadn't orchestrated a phony same-sex marriage debate that censored the actual question in order to demonize one camp in the eyes of the other, then we would be having a mutually respectful public discussion. instead of lots of Americans feeling that lots of other Americans have profoundly and fundamentally wrong and terrible values, we would know that most Americans, regardless of their views on marriage, are good and decent people who, in a real, not fake democracy, would be in power. Instead of being asked to choose between two bad alternatives, the way big money always frames things for us, we would be having a public discussion about how things should be in a good society, based on the idea that the needs of children trump the desires of adults. In a real democracy, we'd be having a discussion of how to permit infertile couples to have a child of their own with a sperm or egg donor and still ensure that children are not thereby denied the opportunity to know and be known by both their biological parents. We'd be choosing between possibly different but reasonable ways of doing this. This is how it would be in a good society. To get such a society, however, we need an egalitarian revolution. This in turn requires solidarity among the 80% or so of Americans who want equality with no rich and no poor. And this in turn requires mutual respect as well as concern for one another. This is exactly what big money is trying to destroy with its orchestration of a phony debate on same-sex marriage. For more about egalitarian revolution, please visit pdrboston.org. Thank you.